The Count invited the maid to the royal ball, but served her the same wine that had killed his wife. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Snow had begun to fall again, thick and soundless, whitening the courtyards of the Reinhardt estate. The morning bell had barely finished echoing when Elena was called to the east wing. She wiped her hands on her apron, startled. No servant was ever summoned there. The east wing belonged to the Count himself, a place wrapped in silence since the Countess's passing. She walked through the long corridor, past portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her steps. At the door of the study, she hesitated. The butler, old Mr. Kreutz, motioned for her to enter. His face was pale, as though he'd seen something he did not wish to believe. The Count stood by the tall window, facing the winter garden. His dark coat fell sharply against the light. He did not turn when she curtsied. "Elena," he said, his voice quiet yet heavy. "How long have you been in my service?" "Since I was a child, my lord. 14 years. He nodded once, as though confirming something to himself. 14 years of silence, he murmured. And loyalty. She waited, unsure if she was to answer. Her hands, still damp from polishing the silver, trembled slightly. He turned then, and for a moment she saw the man spoken of in whispers. Adrian von Reinhardt, widower, nobleman, and recluse. His eyes were strikingly calm, though his face bore the faint marks of sleeplessness. He crossed the room, holding a sealed envelope between two fingers. The wax glowed crimson in the firelight, stamped with the von Reinhardt crest. "You will receive this, not as a servant," he said, "but as my guest." She stared, unable to speak. "My lord," he extended the envelope. "You are invited to the royal ball next fortnight. You will attend in my company." The words sounded unreal, like something whispered in a dream. Her heart pounded. "But I cannot, sir. I'm a maid. I serve those who attend." "That will change for one night." His tone left no space for refusal. "You will be presented as a guest of the house. That is my wish." Eleanor's voice barely rose. "But why me?" Adrian's gaze drifted to the window again. "Because you have never asked anything of me." The fire cracked softly in the hearth. She could hear her own breath. "My lord, people will speak. They already do." "Let them," he said. "I have lived too long with silence. A night of scandal cannot wound me further." His words chilled her. Yet there was no mockery in his tone, only weariness, and something that might have been sorrow. He dismissed her with a nod, as though the matter were concluded. The butler opened the door silently. Outside, the maids were waiting. They surrounded her the moment she stepped into the servants' hall. "Is it true?" whispered Anna, her closest friend. "Did he really—" Elena pressed the envelope to her chest. "He invited me to the ball." Gasps broke out. Someone laughed nervously. "You'll be the death of him too," muttered a voice from the corner. "Enough," said Frau Weiss, the housekeeper, though even she looked uneasy. "Go back to your duties, all of you." The room dispersed, but the whispers lingered like a shadow. Frau Weiss drew Elena aside. "Child, listen to me," she said softly. "You've always been good. But this is not kindness. It's madness. The Count has not been the same since her death." Elena looked down. He didn't seem mad, only sad. "Sad men are the most dangerous," the housekeeper said, her voice trembling despite her firmness. "They forget what they owe to the living." That evening the servants' quarters were restless. The footman passed rumors from one corridor to another, that the Count had chosen the maid to replace his dead wife, that he was haunted, that he meant to prove something to the court. Eleanor sat by the small window of her chamber, the invitation still unopened on her lap. She traced the seal with her finger. She could still hear the Count's voice, measured, distant, as though speaking from another world. Finally, she broke the seal. The parchment inside was heavy and fragrant with wax. Her name was written in a hand of perfect elegance, Miss Elena Hartmann, guest of Count Adrian von Reinhardt. The letters shimmered faintly in the candlelight, each stroke deliberate, unmistakable. A line of script below caught her breath. "Attendance confirmed by His Majesty's court." "How can it already be confirmed?" she whispered. Anna, who shared the room, looked up from mending her apron. "What did you say?" "Nothing." She folded the paper quickly. "Just nothing." But she did not sleep. The candle burned down to its wick while she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every word from the morning replayed in her mind. You will attend in my company. Near midnight, a light knock came at the door. She rose, startled. When she opened it, Thomas, the stable boy, stood there, cap in hand. His eyes were anxious. I heard what happened, he said. They say you're going to the ball. I don't wish to, she whispered. I'll find a way to refuse. Refuse a count? Eleanor, they'll dismiss you. Or worse. She leaned against the doorframe, feeling the cold draught from the hall. Why would he invite me, Thomas? What could he want from me? He looked down, hesitant. My mother worked in the kitchens back then. She said the night the Countess died, she drank the same wine he poured for her. He never drank his own. Elena shivered. That was a year ago. Rumors don't die with time, he said. Just be careful. She wanted to laugh it off, but the fear in his face silenced her. Thank you, Thomas, she said softly. I will. When morning came, the courtyard glittered with frost. The entire estate buzzed with preparations for the royal ball, polishing chandeliers, pressing uniforms, repairing carriages, yet whispers followed her wherever she went. Look at her, said one maid when she thought Elena couldn't hear. The Count must have lost his senses. Or his heart, said another. It's the same, isn't it? By afternoon, the invitation had reached Lady Gertrude, the Count's aunt. She demanded an audience with him at once. Elena overheard fragments of their argument echoing through the marble corridor. You insult the family name! The lady's voice rose, sharp and trembling. A maid in your company? What will the court think? The court already thinks I killed my wife, Adrian replied evenly. Let them think worse if it amuses them. Gertrude's tone turned pleading. Adrian, you are grieving, I understand, but this will not bring her back. No, he said, but perhaps it will stop her from haunting me. There was silence, then the sound of a door closing firmly. Later that evening, when Eleanor brought tea to the drawing-room, she found him alone, standing by the fire. He glanced up as she entered. Do you regret accepting the invitation? He asked quietly. I haven't accepted, my lord, she answered. I have not even replied. He regarded her for a moment. Then allow me to make it simpler. He moved to his desk and signed something swiftly on a document. Now you are listed among my guests. The court cannot revoke it without insult. Her mouth fell open. You cannot decide for me, sir. I already have. His tone was gentle, not cruel. Sometimes one must be led into destiny. Even if she walks unwillingly, her heart raced. You speak as though you know mine. Perhaps I do. She gathered her courage. People say dreadful things, my lord. About you. About your wife's death. He turned, his eyes darkening, though his voice remained calm. People say what fills their emptiness. The truth is far lonelier. She hesitated. Why me? A pause. Then softly, because you looked at me once and did not turn away. The air between them grew still. She could hear the slow ticking of the mantel clock. I should go, she whispered. He inclined his head. Then go. But remember, silence can wound more deeply than rumor. She left with her pulse pounding, uncertain whether she'd been warned or consoled. That night she sat by the window again, watching snow veil the garden. The estate slept, but she could not. She thought of the Count's expression, not madness, not cruelty, but something haunted. When dawn came, she resolved to refuse. She rehearsed the words in her head as she descended the servant stairs. But before she reached the bottom, the butler intercepted her. Miss Hartman, he said, his tone strangely formal, a messenger from the palace has arrived. A messenger? For me? Yes, ma'am. He handed her a folded parchment sealed in blue wax. The emblem was unmistakable, the royal crest of Austria. She opened it with trembling hands. It was a list of confirmed guests for the upcoming ball. Her name appeared in the center, written with deliberate clarity. Miss Elena Hartmann, guest of Count von Reinhardt. The note at the bottom read, Carriage arranged. Attire to be provided by the estate. Attendance is expected. She stared at it, speechless. The butler looked away, uneasy. His lordship instructed that the gown will be prepared by tomorrow. He said you are not to worry about anything. Elena shook her head. I never replied to his invitation. How could this... He interrupted gently. Miss, the list was issued from the royal court itself. It bears the king's signature. There is no changing it now. Her throat tightened. So I am to go, whether I wish it or not. It seems destiny has made your choice, he said. She clutched the parchment, her thoughts spinning. Beyond the frost-covered window, she could see the carriages being polished, the banners hung, the air bright with preparations. From somewhere deep in the manor came the sound of the Count's voice giving instructions to the steward, firm, calm, unshakable. A shiver ran through her as she looked again at the parchment. Her name gleamed beside his in elegant ink. The royal seal bore her name, as if destiny itself had accepted the invitation on her behalf. The following morning brought the bustle of preparation. The manor seemed to awaken from its long sleep, alive with voices, footsteps, and the sharp scent of polish. Elena tried to keep her mind on her duties, but every corridor she entered fell silent at her approach. Eyes followed her as though she carried a secret too heavy for her small hands. Before noon, Frau Weiss appeared at her door, holding a folded note. "From the Count," she said, her lips pressed thin. "Read it, child, and tell me he has not lost all sense." Elena broke the seal. The handwriting was the same deliberate elegance as before. Wear this, for it belonged to a woman who once believed in kindness. Beneath the line was a short signature, A. von Reinhardt. Frau Weiss watched her expression. "What does it say?" "Only that a gown will be sent to my chamber," Elena murmured. "A gown?" "From the Count's late wife, no doubt." The housekeeper crossed herself. "It is not right, Elena. Clothes carry memory, and hers was a heavy one." Elena smiled faintly, though her chest felt tight. "Perhaps it is only a gesture. Nothing more." The housekeeper looked unconvinced. "Gestures from grieving men are dangerous things. You'll remember my words." That afternoon, 2 maids arrived carrying a long, wrapped bundle. They laid it carefully across Elena's bed and left without speaking. She unwrapped the linen slowly. Inside lay a gown of pale ivory silk, its fabric shimmering faintly even in the grey light. It was beautiful, but the beauty made her uneasy. The sleeves were trimmed with lace, the same lace she had once ironed for the Countess. As she lifted the hem, her breath caught. Near the edge, embroidered in silver thread, was a small rose, the same motif carved upon the Countess's tomb. Her hands trembled. A knock startled her. It was Thomas, peering through the half-open door. "May I come in?" She nodded, stepping aside. He looked at the gown and frowned. "So it's true. He's dressing you in her ghost's clothes. Thomas, please. You think this is kindness? He's gone mad with grief." She folded the gown carefully. "It's only for one night." "One night was all it took for his wife to die," he said quietly. "My mother saw it. She said the Count poured the wine himself, red as blood, she said. And he didn't drink a drop." Eleanor turned toward him. "You believe he poisoned her?" He lowered his eyes. "I don't know what to believe, but I know you shouldn't trust him." She tried to speak lightly. "Perhaps you're jealous." He met her gaze, and the jest fell away. "I am," he admitted, "but I'd rather lose you to life than to death." His words stayed with her long after he left. That evening, as the servants prepared the ballroom for the following week's event, she stood in front of the mirror, staring at the gown laid out behind her. The silk seemed to watch her reflection, waiting. When she finally wore it, the fabric was cool against her skin, almost alive. Frau Weiss tied the ribbons in silence. "You look like her," the housekeeper whispered. "God forgive us." "But you do." Elena swallowed. "He will hardly notice me." "Oh, he will notice," Frau Weiss said grimly. "That's what frightens me." The night of the ball arrived faster than she had imagined. The manor glittered under 1,000 candles. Carriages rolled through the gates, their wheels crunching on the frost. The courtyard filled with laughter and the rustle of silk. Eleanor stood at the top of the servants' staircase, watching the guests descend into the ballroom. The chandeliers blazed overhead, scattering light across the polished floor. The orchestra tuned their instruments. The air shimmered with excitement. "Go on," whispered Frau Weiss, who had come to see her off. "Best get it over with." Eleanor nodded, though her knees shook beneath the heavy gown. She followed the butler's lead through a side corridor until they reached the grand staircase. The doors opened and every head turned. A murmur rippled through the room as she stepped into view. Conversations faltered. Fans paused mid-wave. She felt the heat of their stares on her skin. "Is that the maid?" someone whispered. "Wearing the Countess's dress?" The orchestra fell silent. At the far end of the ballroom, Count Adrian stood beside the royal envoy. He turned slowly. Their eyes met across the distance. His expression was unreadable, neither surprise nor approval, only a quiet certainty, as if this moment had long been foreseen. He moved toward the staircase, each step measured, the crowd parting before him. When he reached her, he bowed. "You came," he said softly. "I was told it was expected. Then we are both prisoners of expectation." His smile flickered for an instant. "May I have the honor of the first waltz?" She hesitated. "My lord, I am no dancer." "Then let us both stumble together," he said, extending his hand. Her fingers barely touched his, but the contact sent a strange warmth through her. The music began again, soft at first, then swelling into rhythm. The Count guided her across the floor, his movements graceful despite her uncertainty. Around them, whispers bloomed like flowers. Scandalous. Madness. "She looks terrified. She looks like his wife." Elena tried to keep her eyes lowered, but the Count's voice drew her attention upward. "Do you remember her laughter?" he asked. "My lord." "My wife. You served at her table often. Do you remember her laughter?" "Yes," she said quietly. "It was gentle." His hand tightened around hers. "Gentle," he repeated, "and short-lived." They turned. The chandeliers reflected in the floor beneath them. "Do they still speak of her in the servants' hall?" "Sometimes," Elena said. "They say she was kind and lonely." He gave a faint, bitter laugh. "Then they are kinder than the court." The music rose. His breath was close to her ear. "Tonight, Miss Hartmann, we shall silence the ghosts." The words chilled her, though his tone was calm. "I do not understand," she whispered. "For you will," he said, and his hand slid from her waist as the waltz ended. Applause followed, hesitant and uncertain. The royal envoy smiled stiffly, unwilling to break decorum. Adrian led her to a small table set with crystal goblets. "You must be thirsty," he said, signaling a servant. 2 glasses of deep red wine were brought forth, gleaming like garnet beneath the light. He took one, then offered her the other. Eleanor hesitated. He raised his glass slightly. "To memory." She stared at the liquid. Its scent rich and familiar. "This wine," she said slowly. "What vintage is it?" "The same we served a year ago," he replied. "My wife's favorite." Her throat tightened. "I cannot, my lord." "Why not?" His gaze was unreadable, though not unkind. "Do you fear me?" The words came before she could stop them. "Should I?" Something passed through his expression. A flicker of pain. "If you must fear anything," he said, "fear what silence hides." Before she could answer, Lady Gertrude appeared at his side, her fan trembling in her gloved hand. "Adrian," she hissed, "must you repeat the past before all these people?" The Count's jaw hardened. "Return to your seat, Aunt. This is not your concern." "It is the family's concern," she cried in a sharp whisper. "Have you no shame left?" The crowd turned, uneasy. The orchestra faltered. For a heartbeat, even the candles seemed to waver. Adrian's voice dropped to a low command. "Enough. Not here." Lady Gertrude paled, glancing around as if realizing how many eyes were on her. She turned sharply and withdrew toward the far side of the room. The musicians resumed their playing, but the laughter did not return. Elena stood with the untouched goblet in her hand. Her heart pounded. "I should return to the servants' hall," she whispered. The Count's lips curved faintly. "You have risen far above it tonight. Do not fall so soon." "I am no lady, my lord." "No," he said softly, "and that is precisely why you are worth noticing." Her hand trembled, the wine rippled in the glass. "If this is mockery, it is not." His eyes caught hers, dark and steady. "Drink if you wish, or refuse. The choice is yours." She set the goblet down. "I refuse." A faint smile touched his lips. "Wise." He turned away, his voice carrying only to her. "Some truths are best delayed." The music swelled again, covering his retreat. Elena stood motionless, staring at the untouched wine. The scent lingered, sweet and heavy, curling through her thoughts like smoke. She turned to leave when a figure brushed past her, someone wearing a black mask and dark cloak. The stranger's gloved hand slipped something into her palm so discreetly she almost missed it. Startled, she looked down. A folded piece of paper rested in her hand. She moved toward the gallery, away from the crowd, and opened it beneath the dim light of a candelabra. 4 words were scrawled across the page in hurried ink. "The Count knows everything." The glass trembled in her hand, and the scent of the wine was achingly familiar. Eleanor stood in the shadow of the gallery, the folded note still trembling between her fingers. The words seemed to burn against her skin. "The Count knows everything." She looked over the balcony to the ballroom below. The dancers spun in a blur of satin and candlelight, unaware that the air had shifted, that something dark whispered between the walls. Her first thought was to flee, to find Thomas or Frau Weiss, or anyone who could help her make sense of this. But a soft voice interrupted her panic. "You look pale, Miss Hartmann." It was the Count. He had appeared without sound, as if he'd stepped out of the darkness itself. His expression was calm, though his eyes betrayed something restless beneath the surface. I needed air," she said quickly, closing her hand around the note. He studied her for a long moment. "Air can be scarce in a room full of masks," he said. "Come, walk with me. The balcony is quieter." She followed him, her steps hesitant. The glass doors opened to a rush of cold night air. The gardens below shimmered with frost. From here, the laughter of the guests sounded distant, unreal. Adrian leaned against the railing, his breath visible in the chill. "Do you enjoy the ball?" "It is more beautiful than I imagined," she said softly. "And more frightening." "Frightening?" He glanced at her. "Why?" "Because nothing here feels true. Everyone smiles, yet they whisper." He gave a faint smile. "Whispers are the only language the court understands." She turned to face him. "And what do they whisper about you, my lord?" He hesitated, then said, "That I am a murderer." Her heart stopped for an instant. "Do you deny it?" He met her gaze. "Would you believe me if I did?" She tried to speak, but her voice failed. He looked out over the gardens again. "The night my wife died, I stood where you are now. The same wind, the same silence. She was playing the piano downstairs, and then nothing. When I found her, the glass lay beside her hand, the same wine we drank tonight." Eleanor's voice came out in a whisper. "Then why serve it again?" He exhaled slowly. "Because sometimes the only way to end a ghost's power is to call it by name. I wanted to face what I buried." She stepped closer, her fear mingling with something else. Pity, perhaps, or understanding. "And you invited me to share that?" He looked at her then, his eyes shadowed. "I invited you because you remind me of the night before she died, of innocence before guilt, of a truth that asks nothing." Before she could answer, the music inside grew louder. The ballroom doors opened, spilling light and voices onto the balcony. Lady Gertrude approached, her expression sharp as glass. "Adrian," she said in a low voice, "you are causing a spectacle. Half the court is already whispering that you intend to replace your wife with her." She cast a scornful glance at Elena. "Have you lost all sense of dignity?" The Count's expression did not change. "Leave us, Aunt." "I will not. You drag this family's name through the mud." He turned slowly to face her. "The name was buried with her. I'm only trying to give it peace." Gertrude's lips thinned. "Peace? You disgrace yourself. You disgrace her memory." "Do not speak of memory," he said quietly. "You know little of it." Her voice rose. "You think you can silence the past with a servant's face? She will never be your redemption." A ripple of murmurs reached them from inside the ballroom. Adrian's eyes darkened. "Enough." His tone left no doubt of command. "Return to your seat." Gertrude's fan snapped shut. "You will regret this, Adrian," she hissed, "as surely as she regretted marrying you." She turned and swept back into the ballroom. For a moment, the cold seemed sharper. Eleanor's hands were clasped tightly together. "She hates me," she murmured. "She fears what she cannot control," Adrian replied. "She said your wife regretted her marriage." His voice dropped. "Perhaps she did. Loneliness can make regret out of anything." The orchestra struck up a new tune. From where they stood, they could see the guests returning to the dance floor. The candlelight glowed against the glass, creating reflections of faces and masks. So many, they seemed to multiply endlessly. Elena's heart still pounded. "My lord, there is something I must tell you." He looked at her with quiet curiosity. "Yes?" But she faltered. The note in her hand felt like a secret she dared not reveal. What if it was a trap, a cruel jest? She forced a smile. "Nothing. Only that I should thank you for this kindness. It is more than I deserve." He studied her face as if sensing her hesitation. "Kindness is a word for the weak," he said softly. "This is not kindness, Elena. It is truth wearing a dangerous mask." He stepped closer, his breath mingling with the cold air. "You think me cruel." "I think you are hiding something," she said, almost trembling. "Then perhaps you are the only one who sees clearly tonight." The orchestra reached a crescendo. Laughter drifted up again. The spell between them broke. Adrian turned back toward the hall. "Come. The guests will grow suspicious if we linger too long." She followed him inside, still holding the note hidden within her palm. The ballroom looked brighter than before, almost blinding after the darkness of the balcony. As they crossed the floor, people stepped aside, bowing slightly yet staring. Adrian paused near the musicians, exchanging brief words with the conductor. The music shifted to a slower rhythm. "A farewell waltz," he said quietly. "Dance with me once more, Miss Hartman." Her throat was dry. "I think I have already caused enough scandal for one night." "Scandal is only truth spoken too loudly," he replied, taking her hand before she could protest. The dance began. His movements were slower now, more deliberate. The crowd had grown silent again, captivated by the sight of them. "Why are you doing this?" she asked under her breath. "Because they need to see I am still alive," he said, "and because I need to remember that you are." His words unsettled her more than comforted. "You speak as if I belong to your past." "Perhaps you do." She looked up at him. "And if I remind you of something you cannot bear, then perhaps I must bear it anyway." When the final chord sounded, the Count released her hand slowly. The guests applauded, though the sound was muted, uncertain. Adrian bowed slightly. "You dance better than you believe, and you lead better than you admit," she answered, trying to steady her voice. He smiled faintly and turned away to greet a passing nobleman. In that moment, she slipped toward the edge of the ballroom, needing distance, needing breath. She moved behind the rows of tall windows where the noise softened. Opening her hand, she read the note again. "The Count knows everything." Her pulse quickened. What did he know? That she had once seen the Countess collapse? That she had overheard the argument between husband and wife the night before her death? She had never told anyone about that. The memory was buried deep, almost forgotten. Until now. "Elena." She spun around. The masked messenger stood there, half hidden by a marble column. The black mask concealed his face, but his voice was rough, urgent. "Do not trust him." Her voice shook. "Who are you?" "Someone who saw what happened that night." She stepped closer. "Then tell me." He glanced toward the ballroom. "Not here. Meet me near the music room before midnight. Bring no one." Before she could answer, he vanished into the crowd, lost among the dancers and laughter. Elena stood frozen, the sound of the orchestra swelling again around her. When she turned back toward the Count, he was watching her from across the room, his gaze steady and unreadable. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Nobles came and went, conversations rose and fell, yet she felt outside of it all. When she tried to excuse herself, Adrian stopped her gently. "Leaving so soon?" "I am unwell," she said truthfully. He regarded her quietly. "Then rest a while, the winter garden is empty." She curtsied, barely able to meet his eyes, and slipped away. The corridor beyond the ballroom was dim, lit only by a few scattered candles. The sound of music faded behind her. Her footsteps echoed softly against the marble floor. She reached the small door that led to the western wing, the path to the music room. The note and the stranger's warning pulsed in her mind. The handle was cold beneath her fingers. She hesitated, listening. No sound came from within. Slowly she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The faint scent of dust and wood greeted her. Moonlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating a grand piano covered with a thin layer of dust. Upon the stand lay a sheet of music, unfinished, the ink fading. She approached it, drawn by a strange recognition. The melody, she knew it. It was the tune the Countess had played the night she died. Her heart pounded. She reached out to trace the final notes and froze when a voice spoke behind her. "I thought you might come." Adrian stood in the doorway, his face half in shadow. "My lord," she breathed, "I thought this room was locked." Some doors unlock themselves when memory demands it. He walked toward the piano, touching the keys lightly. She used to play every evening. This was her last song. Eleanor's voice trembled. She never finished it. No, he said quietly. And neither did I. He sat at the piano bench, playing a few hesitant notes. The melody wavered, unfinished, just as it had that night. She was ill, he said suddenly, but no one could tell me what ailed her. The physicians called it melancholy. The court called it guilt. I called it silence. Eleanor's breath caught. Silence? She feared it more than death, and still it took her. She watched him, the sadness in his movements unmistakable. Why tell me this? He looked up at her, eyes dark and restless. Because you asked why I chose you. The answer is simple. You remind me of the moment before the end. She stood speechless, caught between fear and pity. Outside, the clock began to strike 11, each chime echoing through the halls. As the final note faded, a sudden dizziness washed over her. The room tilted, the candlelight blurring. She tried to speak, but the words dissolved on her tongue. Adrian rose quickly, his voice distant, concerned, but the sound melted into a low hum. The last thing she saw was his face bending toward hers, the world spinning around them like a fading waltz. Outside, the clock struck 11, and Elena felt a sudden wave of dizziness sweep through her body. The room swayed, the piano keys blurring into streaks of white and gold. Elena clutched the edge of the instrument, but her fingers slid off the polished wood. A strange warmth spread through her veins, and the air seemed to thicken around her. She tried to speak, to ask for help, yet her voice dissolved into a faint gasp. Adrian's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. "Elena?" His voice was sharp, alarmed. "What's happening?" Her knees buckled. The Count caught her before she fell, lowering her gently into the nearest chair. Her skin was pale, her eyes half closed. "It's nothing," she whispered, though her heart raced wildly. "Only dizziness." He turned toward the doorway. "Kreutz, water, quickly." The butler appeared almost at once, his face stricken. "My lord, now." Adrian's tone was a command that brooked no hesitation. The old man vanished and returned moments later with a crystal glass. Adrian held it to her lips. She tried to drink, but the water slipped down too fast, making her cough. He crouched beside her. "Tell me, did you eat? Did someone—" He stopped. His eyes moved to the table. The half-empty goblet of wine still stood there, dark as spilled blood. A flicker of fear crossed his face. "You didn't drink that, did you?" She shook her head weakly. "No, I—" The door burst open. Lady Gertrude's sharp voice filled the room. "What is this commotion? The guests are asking questions. Adrian, you're making a spectacle again." Adrian rose, his expression cold. "My guest is unwell." "Your guest?" Gertrude's eyes darted to the pale figure in the chair. "The maid, you mean?" Eleanor struggled to speak. "I am— sorry, my lady, I—" Gertrude's tone sliced through her words. "She should never have been here. Do you see what comes of your folly, Adrian? You bring her into the same room where your wife played her final notes. Have you no sense left?" Adrian's voice dropped, dangerous and low. "Leave." "I will not." She stepped closer, her fan trembling. "You disgrace the family before the court. You repeat every cursed moment of that night. The same gown, the same wine, the same—" "Enough!" His hand came down on the piano, a sharp chord ringing through the room. The sound silenced her. The candles flickered violently, as if the house itself flinched. Gertrude's eyes widened, then narrowed. "You've lost your mind," she whispered. "She'll die, just as the other did, and the world will know whose hand guided the glass." Her words made the air colder. Adrian's face was pale now, yet his voice steadied. "Get out, Aunt, before your tongue damns you." For a moment, she looked as though she might strike him. Then she turned sharply, skirts whispering, and stormed out. The Count knelt beside Elena again. "You must rest," he said. "The winter garden is warmer, quieter." She shook her head. "I'm better now." "You are not." He lifted her carefully, his arms steady beneath her shoulders. "No one will disturb us there." The corridors blurred past in flickers of candlelight and murmured voices. The winter garden was a glass chamber filled with moonlight. The air scented faintly of pine. He placed her on a cushioned seat near the fountain, where the water murmured softly. She leaned back, trying to steady her breath. "I shouldn't be here, my lord. I've caused too much trouble." Adrian sank into the chair opposite her. "You caused nothing. It is I who brought the ghosts to supper." His tone was quiet, but she could hear the weariness beneath it. "You think your aunt is right," she said, "that people will believe I will die, as your wife did." He looked up, his eyes dark. "I think people believe what they want to see. A tale told too often becomes its own truth." The fountain's trickle filled the silence. "Why invite me then?" she asked. "Why bring me into a story that has already ended so sadly?" He hesitated before answering. "Because you look at me as though there might still be another chapter." Her pulse quickened. "You mistake pity for hope." "Perhaps," he said softly, "but pity does not risk itself on poison." She looked at him sharply. "Then it was poison." He leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "No one proved it, but they whispered it as they whisper now. The court loves tragedy, provided it isn't their own." She lowered her voice. "And do you know the truth?" His eyes met hers, tired yet steady. "I know that she was unhappy, and that I was too blind to see it." There was a long pause. The sound of the fountain seemed to echo like a sigh. "Adrian," she said quietly, "if I remind you of that night, why keep me near?" He looked at her, and for a moment the mask of the nobleman fell away. "Because if I can keep you safe," he said, "perhaps I can forgive myself." She turned her face away, overwhelmed. The moonlight glimmered against the glass panels, scattering across the marble floor. "I don't understand you, my lord. One moment you frighten me, the next you speak as if you care." "Perhaps I frighten myself," he murmured. "And care too much." She rose unsteadily. "I need to return to the servants' hall." He stood as well. "No, you're pale. Sit a moment longer." The gentle authority in his voice stopped her. She obeyed, though her heart thudded. "Do you hear it?" she asked suddenly. "Hear what?" The music stopped. He frowned. The faint waltz that had floated from the ballroom moments ago was gone. In its place came a distant silence, heavy and wrong. Then, a scream. It tore through the manor like a blade, high and sharp, echoing against the marble halls. Adrian's head snapped toward the door. "Stay here," he ordered. Eleanor caught his arm. "No, please. What if—" He met her eyes. "Then we will face it together." They hurried down the corridor, the sound of hurried footsteps approaching from the other end. Guests were spilling out of the ballroom, pale and murmuring. "Something happened." "Lady Gertrude, she's fainted. No, she's screaming." They reached the grand hall. Lady Gertrude stood in the center, her hands shaking, pointing toward the far wall. "The mirror," she whispered hoarsely. "Look at the mirror." The great gilded glass above the staircase was shattered, its surface spider-webbed with cracks. On the floor beneath it, among the shards, red letters glistened, drawn not with paint, but with wine. The words were jagged, uneven. "The truth sleeps in the cellar." Gasps filled the room. Someone crossed themselves. Others began whispering that it was an omen, that the Countess's spirit had returned. Adrian strode forward, his expression composed, though his hands clenched. "Everyone remain calm," he said. "No one is to leave the house." The murmurs grew louder. "He's repeating the madness." "This is the second time." Gertrude's eyes blazed. "You see, even the walls accuse you." "Be silent," Adrian snapped. But Elena saw something else in his face, fear, not anger. He turned toward her. "Come with me," he said in a low voice. "We must see the cellar." "The cellar," she whispered. "Why?" "Because that's where truth tends to hide." He motioned for the butler to guard the ballroom doors and led her down the side staircase, away from the murmuring crowd. The corridor grew colder as they descended. Candles flickered in their holders. "Who could have done it?" Eleanor asked, her voice shaking. "Someone who wants to remind me of guilt," he said, "or someone who wants to share it." The air grew damp. They reached the heavy wooden door of the wine cellar. Adrian took a lantern from the wall and pushed the door open. The smell of oak and earth met them. Rows of barrels lined the walls. Near the far corner, something glinted. Adrian approached, his boots echoing softly. An old chest sat against the stone wall, half hidden beneath a tattered cloth. The lock was broken. He lifted the lid. Inside were bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon. "What are they?" Elena asked. "My wife's hand," he said quietly, taking one. The paper was fragile, the ink pale. I kept them sealed since her death. He untied the ribbon and unfolded a letter. The handwriting wavered, uneven, as though written by a trembling hand. Forgive me, Adrian. The physician's tonic is not for illness, it is for escape. Elena felt the air leave her lungs. She meant to... He nodded slowly. She took her own life. He read the next lines aloud, voice barely above a whisper. I am sorry. I cannot bear the quiet, the gossip, the endless pity. I have brought shame upon your name. Let them think what they will. He lowered the page, his hand trembling. All this time I thought... He stopped, unable to finish. Elena's voice was gentle. You thought you killed her. He closed his eyes. And I let them believe it. The silence stretched between them. The lantern light flickered across the damp stone. You must show this to them, she said. They will know the truth now. He shook his head. They will say I forged it. They always do. Before she could argue, a faint sound echoed from above. A door closing, followed by the click of a lock. Adrian looked up sharply. Elena, he said quietly, someone just sealed the passage. She ran to the steps and tried the handle. It would not move. We're locked in. He lifted the lantern, scanning the walls. A broken bottle lay on the floor near the stairs, its contents seeping into the earth. The scent of wine hung heavy. But beneath it was something bitter. His eyes narrowed. That smell, he said. Do you notice it? She nodded, covering her mouth. It burns the air. Adrian bent closer to the puddle. The liquid shimmered faintly in the light. It's not wine, he murmured. It's the same mixture that took her life. Eleanor stepped back, her heartbeat quickening. Then whoever wrote on the mirror wants history to repeat itself, he finished grimly. The lantern flame flickered as the fumes rose thicker. He reached for her hand. We must find another way out, quickly. But the shadows seemed to move closer, the air tightening around them. The faint trickle of liquid continued somewhere in the dark, drop after drop, falling like the measured ticking of an unseen clock. Trapped in the cellar, they heard liquid dripping, and the faint scent of poisoned wine filling the air. The air in the cellar grew heavier, tinged with that bitter scent that stung the back of the throat. The lantern flickered, struggling against the gloom. Eleanor pressed her sleeve over her mouth. It's poison, isn't it? Adrian didn't answer at once. He knelt beside the puddle, studying the color of the liquid that had soaked into the earth. Old wine would not smell like this, he said. Someone mixed it with something foul. Whoever sealed the door wanted this air to turn deadly. Her pulse raced. Then we must get out. He lifted the lantern higher, scanning the walls. There's a side passage. There used to be. He moved toward the far end of the cellar, where the walls curved inward. Help me look. Eleanor followed, her steps echoing softly. She felt dizzy again, though not from poison. Fear seemed to crowd out her breath. Why would anyone do this? Why now? Adrian ran his hand along the stone. Because I refuse to stay silent. Whoever haunts this house lives by silence. Her fingers brushed something, a faint crack in the wall. Here, she whispered. He joined her, pressing against the stone. The seam shifted slightly. He pushed harder, and a section of the wall gave way with a groan, revealing a narrow corridor behind it. Go, he said. What about the lantern? It will burn the fumes. Leave it. He took her hand, and together they stepped into the darkness. The door behind them swung shut, sealing off the smell of wine and death. The passage was narrow and cold, their footsteps muffled. The only light came from a faint glow ahead, moonlight seeping through an opening. They emerged into the courtyard beside the old chapel. The night air struck them like water, sharp and clean. Elena drew a deep breath, coughing out the cellar's poison. Adrian looked back toward the manor. Someone planned this carefully. They wanted the guests above to think another tragedy had struck, and to find me beside you when it happened. She steadied herself against the chapel wall. Then whoever it was must still be inside, perhaps even watching. He nodded grimly. Gertrude. Eleanor hesitated. You believe your aunt would do such a thing? I believe she would do anything to protect the family's name, even if she must soil it with her own hands. The chapel bell tolled softly, as if stirred by the wind. Its hollow sound rolled through the night. Adrian turned to her. We must go back. The truth lies open now, and if we let her speak first, she will twist it into something unforgivable. They re-entered through the servants' entrance. The corridors were nearly empty. Most guests had gathered in the ballroom after the scream. The flicker of torches made shadows leap along the walls. Adrian moved with quiet urgency. She will be standing before them, pretending fear, pretending innocence. Eleanor followed close behind. And if they don't believe us? Then I'll give them proof they cannot deny. They entered the grand hall. The crowd had thickened again, the air filled with whispers. Gertrude stood near the staircase, her face pale, her composure flawless. She was speaking to the royal envoy, her tone honeyed with grief. "It is dreadful, my lord. That poor girl. She followed him into the very cellar where his wife perished. It's as though the curse repeats itself." The envoy frowned. "The cellar? Is she harmed?" Gertrude lowered her eyes. "Who can say?" He locked the door behind them. At that moment, the great doors opened, and Adrian appeared with Eleanor beside him. The guests gasped. The aunt's mask of sorrow cracked for an instant. "My lord," said the envoy sharply, "your guests are concerned. Lady Gertrude claims—" Adrian's voice cut through the noise. "My aunt claims many things, most of them lies." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Gertrude stepped forward, trembling with indignation. "How dare you speak so before the court? How dare you imprison me and my guest in the cellar?" His voice was steady, but his eyes blazed. "So you arranged every detail, didn't you? The mirror, the message, even the poison." Her hand flew to her chest. "You accuse me of murder?" "I accuse you of fear," he said, "of choosing your reputation over truth." The envoy looked from one to the other, uncertain. "What proof have you, Count?" Adrian reached into his coat and drew out a folded letter, stained from the cellar's damp. "This was written by my wife. It was kept locked away where only my aunt had the key." Gertrude's voice trembled. "You dare to bring her letters before strangers?" "Yes," he said coldly, "because she was never allowed to speak while she lived." He opened the paper and read aloud, his voice echoing through the hall. "Forgive me, Adrian. The physician's tonic is not for illness. It is for escape. I cannot bear the pity, the silence. Let them think what they will." The crowd stilled. The music from the orchestra died entirely. Gertrude's eyes darted wildly. "You forged that. You—" "It bears her seal," he said, "and the handwriting the court itself once praised for its grace. I buried her in guilt, and you buried the truth beside her." The envoy stepped closer, his expression grave. "Is this true, madam?" "Did you know?" Gertrude's lips quivered. "I sought to protect this family. The Countess was frail, unwell. The scandal would have destroyed us all. What good would truth have done?" Adrian's tone softened, though his words cut deep. "Truth does not destroy. It cleanses. You let me believe I killed her. You watched me sink beneath my own shame." She lifted her chin, proud even in defeat. "Better shame than dishonor." He looked at her with sorrow. "You have never known the difference." Eleanor stepped forward, her hands clasped before her. "My lady," she said quietly, "the Count has suffered enough. Let it end." Gertrude's gaze snapped to her. "You. Everything began when you came into this house. You stirred ghosts best left buried." "I did nothing but serve," Elena replied. "If the dead rise tonight, it is because they demand peace." The older woman's face twisted. "You think you can speak of peace while wearing her gown?" Eleanor's voice did not waver. She gave it freely. For a long moment, no one moved. The crowd watched, torn between scandal and awe. Then the envoy spoke. "Lady Gertrude, you will remain confined to your chambers until His Majesty's Council reviews these accusations." "Count von Reinhardt, I advise calm." Adrian inclined his head, his fury giving way to exhaustion. "There will be no more deaths under this roof," he said. "Tonight, the truth lives." Gertrude's fan slipped from her hand. It clattered against the floor. "You think this is over?" she whispered. "You think ghosts sleep once spoken of?" He turned away, unwilling to answer. The orchestra began to play again, softly, as if to drown the tension. Guests began to murmur and move, some pretending cheer, others fleeing the discomfort of exposed secrets. Eleanor touched Adrian's arm. "You should rest," she said. "You're trembling." "I'm not certain whether from rage or relief," he admitted. "Come. The air here is suffocating." They walked together into the adjoining corridor. The noise of the ballroom faded behind them, replaced by the hush of empty halls. Elena looked at him. "You believed she was guilty all this time, yet you invited me. Why?" He stopped beside a tall window, the moonlight catching the sharp line of his face. "Because I needed someone untainted to look at me, to see whether there was anything left worth forgiving." "There is," she said softly. He turned toward her. "Then I owe you more than I can ever repay." Before she could reply, footsteps echoed at the end of the corridor. A servant appeared, breathless. "My lord, the guests demand to see the letter again. They say it must be verified." Adrian sighed. "Let them verify what they wish. Truth does not fade beneath scrutiny." The servant bowed and left. Elena hesitated. "They will speak of us now. You know that." "I no longer fear their words," he said. "Only the silence that follows them." She smiled faintly. "Then perhaps the silence can finally mean peace." They reached the grand staircase once more. The lights burned low, and the hall was nearly empty now. Adrian paused halfway down, glancing toward the shattered mirror. Its surface reflected nothing but the flicker of candles. "Strange," he murmured. "When I was a boy, my aunt told me mirrors remember what they see. Perhaps this one remembers too much." Elena looked at the broken glass. "Then let it remember truth instead of fear." He smiled, tired but genuine. "You speak as though you've known both." "I have," she said. "But tonight I saw what comes after." He offered his arm. "Then come. The guests will want to see the lady who defied a curse." "The maid, you mean?" "Tonight I mean the only soul in this house who did not lie." They stepped forward together, the last notes of the waltz echoing faintly from the ballroom. The crowd parted once more as they entered. The eyes that had once judged now looked uncertain, even reverent. Adrian turned to them, holding the letter high. "This house will no longer speak in whispers," he said. "My wife's memory is her own, and her peace shall be ours." The guests bowed their heads. Elena stood beside him, feeling the weight of the night lift, though not entirely. There were still secrets buried under the stone floors, but the truth had broken through enough to let them breathe. Then, from the far end of the hall, a door creaked open. A servant stumbled in, pale as parchment. "My lord," he gasped. "There's more, down in the cellar, something burning." Gasps rose again. Adrian's face went still. He turned to Elena, his voice low and urgent. "Stay here." "No," she said, gripping his hand. "We face it together." He hesitated only a moment, then nodded. They hurried toward the cellar door, where the faint smell of smoke was already curling upward through the cracks. Gasps followed them as the crowd parted, the waltz cutting off mid-note, the air tense once more. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he declared, "It was not I who killed her. It was silence itself." The cellar door stood ajar, the smell of smoke drifting upward in thin grey threads. Adrian descended first, lantern in hand, the light swaying across the stone steps. Elena followed close behind, her skirts brushing against the cold wall. Each step seemed to echo louder than the last. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "I'm not afraid," she whispered, though her hands trembled. When they reached the bottom, the lantern's glow revealed a cluster of barrels near the far wall. One was smouldering. Someone had tried to burn the evidence. Adrian rushed forward, grabbing a nearby cloth and smothering the small fire. The air filled with a bitter stench, sharp as vinegar. Eleanor coughed. "Why would anyone burn the cellar?" "To erase the trail," he said. "The letters, the wine, everything that could prove the truth." She looked around. "But who would risk setting fire to the manor?" He turned toward the staircase. "Someone desperate enough to destroy themselves to save their lies." Footsteps echoed above them, followed by hurried voices. A guard appeared at the top of the stairs. "My lord, the royal envoy demands that everyone remain in the ballroom. He fears for your safety." Adrian called back. "Tell him I'll return shortly." He glanced at Elena. "We have to find who came here after we left. The door was locked again when we returned upstairs." "Then they must have had a key," she said. He nodded grimly. "And only a few people do." Elena's eyes widened. "Frau Weiss?" He shook his head. "No, she would never harm you. My aunt, perhaps, but she would not act so rashly. There's someone else in this house." He lifted the lantern higher. A faint trail of footprints showed on the dusty floor, leading away from the barrels toward the old servants' corridor. "Come," he said. They followed the prints through the narrow passage. The walls closed around them, and the air grew cooler again, free from the smoke. At the end of the corridor, they found a small door half open, revealing a flickering candle inside. Adrian pushed it open. The room beyond was lined with crates and shelves, but one stood apart, a chest of ledgers and sealed bottles. He reached for one of the bottles and held it to the light. The liquid inside shimmered faintly violet. "This isn't wine," he murmured. "It's the physician's mixture, the one prescribed to my wife." Eleanor stepped closer. "You mean the tonic she wrote about?" He nodded. "Yes, and someone's been making more." A faint sound interrupted them, the creak of a floorboard behind the door. Adrian turned sharply. "Who's there?" No answer, only silence. Then a shape darted past the doorway. Eleanor gasped. "Someone's running." Adrian set down the lantern and sprinted after the shadow, his footsteps echoing up the corridor. Eleanor gathered her skirts and followed, the light of the lantern flickering behind her. They reached the main hall, where the figure disappeared behind a tapestry near the grand staircase. Adrian tore the tapestry aside. A narrow stairway spiraled upward toward the gallery. "This leads to the servants' quarters," he said. "Go back to the ballroom." "I said I'm not afraid," she replied, climbing after him. At the top of the stair they emerged into a dim hallway. The runner's footsteps were faint but still audible, leading toward the northern wing. Adrian quickened his pace. The corridor opened into a small antechamber, where the moonlight spilled through the windows. A woman stood there, breathing hard, her back to them. "Frau Weiss?" Elena called softly. The housekeeper turned, her face pale and streaked with tears. "My lord," she whispered. "I tried to stop her." "Stop whom?" Adrian demanded. "Your aunt," the woman said. "She went to the cellar after you left. She carried a candle and a bottle. I followed her, but when she saw me, she dropped it and ran. I tried to put out the fire, but it spread too quickly." Adrian's voice tightened. "Where is she now?" "She went toward the chapel," the housekeeper said. "She was muttering, something about silence and punishment." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "The chapel?" Adrian turned to her. "She means to finish what she began. Come." They hurried down the corridor, the echo of their steps chasing them. The chapel doors stood open, the candles inside flickering wildly. Gertrude was kneeling before the altar, her hands clasped, a small vial glinting in the light. "Aunt," Adrian said sharply, "put that down." She turned, her face lined with despair. "You think you've won? You think exposing me will cleanse your sins?" "There are no sins left to cleanse but yours," he said, her eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. I did it for her, for the family. She begged me for help, and I gave it to her." Eleanor stepped forward cautiously. "You gave her the poison?" Gertrude's voice trembled. She was suffering. The court mocked her. The physicians called her unwell. She asked for peace, and I granted it. Adrian stared, speechless. "You killed her." "She asked me to," Gertrude said. "She wanted to die as a lady, not as gossip." Eleanor's heart pounded. "Then why let him take the blame?" Gertrude's face hardened. "Because he would not be still. He sought truth, when truth would ruin us all. I thought guilt might silence him, but he brings a servant into our shame, and you—" She glared at Eleanor, her voice rising. "You dared to wear her gown." Adrian moved closer. "Enough, Aunt. Give me the vial." She held it close to her chest. "No. If peace is to come, it must come for all of us." He took a cautious step forward. "Please." Her eyes flicked toward the vial, then back to him. "You were always kind, Adrian, too kind to live among wolves. I did what you could not." "By killing?" His tone was hollow. "By ending pain." For a moment the three stood in silence, the only sound the hiss of the candles. Then Gertrude's grip loosened. Adrian reached forward and caught the vial before it fell. He closed his hand around it and spoke quietly. "The curse ends here." Gertrude sank to her knees, sobbing. "Then let it end. I cannot face their eyes tomorrow." He turned to Elena. "Fetch the guard." But before she could move, Gertrude whispered something, soft, broken, and collapsed. Adrian caught her, but her head fell limp against his arm. The faint scent of bitter almonds hung in the air. Elena's voice broke. She took it herself. He laid his aunt gently on the floor, his face pale. "The same poison," he murmured. "The same silence." Elena knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his shoulder. She made her choice. Let her rest. For a long time, neither spoke. The candles flickered, their light falling over the still form at the altar. Finally, Adrian rose. "The truth is whole now," he said, "but it has cost too much." They returned to the ballroom together. The music had stopped again, the guests murmuring as guards escorted servants away for questioning. The envoy approached. "My lord," Adrian said quietly, "Lady Gertrude will trouble the court no longer." The envoy studied his face and said no more. He signaled for the musicians to resume, perhaps hoping to restore calm. The waltz began again, subdued, uneasy. Eleanor stood beside Adrian, her hand brushing his sleeve. "You did what you had to," she said softly. He looked down at her, exhaustion etched into his features. "Did I? I cannot tell whether justice lives in truth or mercy." "Perhaps in both," she answered. He sighed, then turned toward the guests. "Go to your carriages," he said aloud. "The ball is over." The crowd began to disperse, their silks whispering against the marble. As the hall emptied, the chandeliers dimmed one by one. Only the two of them remained amid the fading light. Elena spoke first. She wanted to protect what she loved, even in the wrong way. Adrian nodded slowly. "I know. But love that destroys itself ceases to be love." The great clock struck midnight. The echoes rolled through the silent halls. He offered her his arm. "You should rest now." "I will," she said. "After I'm sure you will, too." They left the ballroom together, passing through the corridor lined with portraits. The faces of his ancestors stared down, some proud, some sorrowful, all silent witnesses to the night's revelations. At the foot of the staircase, Adrian stopped. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "there's something I must know. When you fainted earlier, what did you feel?" She hesitated. "Like falling through water, like being pulled backward into someone else's dream." He looked thoughtful. "Perhaps it was the house itself, forcing you to see what it hid from me." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe the house has a soul." He nodded once, weary but peaceful. "If so, it can rest now." As they reached the door to the winter garden, the faint glimmer of dawn touched the glass. He paused, watching the light spread. "Tomorrow there will be questions, investigations, rumors, but tonight at least there is truth." Eleanor touched his hand gently. "And peace." He met her gaze. "Not yet, but you are the first thing that feels close to it." She lowered her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then hold to that. Let it live where silence once did." Outside, the first birds began to sing, their sound breaking the long hush of the night. Then from the corridor behind them, a sharp voice called, "My lord, come quickly, there's someone at the gate, it's the royal courier. He carries an order sealed by the crown." They turned, startled. Elena caught her breath as the messenger appeared in the doorway, cloak wet with dawn mist, his gloved hand holding a folded parchment sealed in gold. "The king commands your presence at Vienna," the man said, his tone urgent. "A matter of the countess's death, reopened in light of tonight's revelations." Adrian's expression hardened. He took the parchment slowly, the wax seal catching the faint morning light, and broke it open. The air between them stilled, waiting for the words that would change everything. The royal courier waited in silence, water dripping from his cloak onto the marble floor. Adrian broke the seal, his eyes scanning the parchment. His jaw tightened as he read. "What does it say?" Eleanor asked softly. He folded the letter and slipped it into his coat. "His Majesty requests my immediate appearance before the council in Vienna. They've reopened the investigation." "But it's over," she said. "The truth is here, in this house." "Truth rarely travels as fast as rumor," he replied quietly. "The court must see for themselves." The courier bowed slightly. "A carriage will be waiting at sunrise, my lord." "You are to leave at once." Adrian nodded. "Tell His Majesty I will come." When the messenger departed, the silence in the hall returned, heavy and uncertain. Elena looked up at him. "You can't go alone, they'll twist your words again. They always do." He turned toward her, the faint light of dawn outlining his face. "You think I'd let them question you?" "I think I was there," she said. "If they're to believe you, they must hear from both of us." He hesitated. "They'll not look kindly on a maid speaking in defense of a nobleman." Then let them see what truth looks like when it's not wrapped in gold, she said, her voice steady. For a long moment he studied her, as though weighing something deeper than her words. Finally he said, "Very well. We leave together." By morning, the estate buzzed with nervous energy. Servants whispered in corners, and the few guests who had stayed overnight prepared to depart. Frau Weiss packed food for the journey, though her hands shook. "Vienna is a cruel place for gentle hearts," she murmured. Eleanor smiled faintly. "Then I'll stay near his." The carriage waited in the courtyard, horses stamping in the cold. Adrian helped her inside, then joined her, the door closing with a hollow thud. As they rode away, the manor shrank behind them, its windows pale in the mist. For a while, neither spoke. The road was rough, lined with bare trees and melting snow. At last, Adrian said quietly, "I once believed Vienna was the center of civilization. Now I see it was only the center of noise." Eleanor glanced at him. "And yet you go back." "Because I must," he said, "to end what began there." They reached the city by nightfall. The lamps of Vienna burned in long rows, their reflections trembling in the wet streets. The carriage stopped before the grand facade of the Royal Council building. Guards saluted, opening the gates. Adrian stepped out, offering his hand to Elena. "Remember," he whispered, "speak only what you saw." "I remember everything," she said. Inside, the hall was vast and cold. High windows let in the faint glow of the moon. The councillors sat in a semicircle, their robes dark as ink. At the center, the royal envoy who had attended the ball now presided, his face unreadable. "Count von Reinhardt," he began, "you have been summoned regarding the death of your late wife, Countess Isolde von Reinhardt. In light of new testimony, the matter demands clarification." Adrian bowed. "I have brought that clarification with me." He handed over the folded letter, the one found in the cellar. The envoy examined the seal, then nodded for a clerk to read it aloud. The hall filled with the Countess's trembling words. When the final line was spoken, a murmur passed among the councillors. The envoy's gaze shifted to Elena. "And who is this young woman?" Adrian replied. "Elena Hartmann, a servant of my household. She witnessed events that confirm my account." The envoy gestured to her. "Speak, Miss Hartmann, tell us what you saw." Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she spoke. She told them of the ball, of the cellar, of the aunt's confession and death. She described the Count's anguish, the letter, the fire, the mirror. When she finished, the room was silent. One of the older councillors leaned forward. "You claim Lady Gertrude admitted to aiding the Countess's death?" "Yes," Elena said. "She said the Countess asked for peace and she gave it to her." "And you have no doubt of the Count's innocence?" She met their eyes. "None." The envoy regarded her with a faint smile. A maid defending her master. Admirable loyalty. Adrian's tone was sharp. "Loyalty to truth, not to me." Another councillor, tall and thin, raised his hand. "Count von Reinhardt, your aunt is dead, and your wife's letter clears you of murder. Yet it raises another question. Why did you conceal it for so long?" "Because I did not know it existed," he said. "It was hidden from me. By the time I found it, silence had already written my guilt." The envoy tapped the desk thoughtfully. "Silence, Count, can be convenient as well as cruel. How are we to know this letter was not forged to save your name?" Adrian's eyes flashed. "Because I have nothing left to save but her peace." The envoy leaned back. "And yet, the rumor persists that your wife's final days were filled with jealousy, that she believed you loved another woman." Eleanor felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "That's false," she said before she could stop herself. The envoy's gaze sharpened. "And how would you know, Miss Hartmann?" She faltered, but Adrian spoke first. "Because I met no woman after my wife until this one, and that meeting brought no jealousy, only truth." The room stirred with murmurs. The envoy looked from one to the other, intrigued. "You speak of the maid with remarkable regard, Count." "I speak of her with gratitude," Adrian said. "She saved my life." The envoy exchanged a glance with the councillors, then rose. "The council will deliberate. You will remain in the city until a verdict is reached." Adrian bowed slightly. "As His Majesty commands." They were escorted to a small antechamber. Once the door closed, Elena let out the breath she'd been holding. "Do you think they'll believe us?" "They must," he said. "The letter is proof." But the envoy, he seemed unconvinced. He thrives on doubt, it gives him power. She sat on a wooden bench, her hands clasped. You faced them without fear. He smiled faintly. Because I was not alone. The door opened, and a guard entered. You are free to stay at the Habsburg Inn until the council's decision. His Majesty himself may wish to speak with you tomorrow. They left the palace under a pale moon. The streets were quiet now, the air sharp with winter. At the inn, a modest fire burned in the hearth. Adrian dismissed the attendant and turned to Elena. You should rest, he said. You've endured enough questions for a lifetime. I couldn't sleep, she admitted. Not until I know the truth will hold. He poured 2 glasses of water from a jug on the table and handed one to her. Then drink to that, he said. She smiled faintly. No more wine? Never again, he said. They sat in silence for a moment, the firelight flickering across the walls. Then Elena spoke quietly. When your wife wrote of silence, she meant more than the world's cruelty, didn't she? He nodded. She meant mine. I loved her, but I did not listen. She suffered while I hid behind pride. And now? Now I listen, he said, looking at her, to every word. The next morning the city awoke under pale sunlight. A messenger arrived with a summons from the palace. Adrian read it aloud. His Majesty requests our presence at noon. The council has reached its conclusion. Elena's heart raced. Today? Today. When they entered the council chamber once more, the air was different, less hostile, but still heavy with formality. The envoy stood, holding a new document. Count von Reinhardt, Miss Hartmann, the council has reached its decision. Based on the recovered letter and testimonies, you are cleared of all accusation. The death of Countess Isolde von Reinhardt is hereby declared an act of her own volition. Adrian inclined his head. His Majesty's mercy restores what the world took from me. The envoy's expression softened, though a faint smile lingered. Not mercy, Count. Justice. He turned to Elena. The court commends your courage, Miss Hartmann. You may return to your duties. Her hands tightened together. With respect, my lord, I no longer have duties in that house. Adrian looked at her quickly but said nothing. The envoy regarded her with curiosity. Then what will you do? She hesitated, glancing at Adrian before answering. Perhaps begin again, without fear, without silence. The envoy nodded. A wise answer. When they left the chamber, the sun had broken fully through the clouds. Vienna glowed, as if cleansed by rain. They walked down the palace steps together, neither speaking. The carriages waited below. Elena stopped halfway. You're free now, she said softly. You can return home. Home? He looked toward the horizon. That house was a tomb. I have no wish to live among ghosts. She met his gaze. Then where will you go? He smiled faintly. Wherever truth still breathes. Before she could answer, another figure appeared at the foot of the steps, the same courier who had brought the summons. My lord, he called. His Majesty requests one more audience, alone. It concerns the inheritance of your late wife's estate. Adrian glanced at Elena. Wait for me here. I will, she said, though unease prickled at her heart. He followed the courier back into the palace. Minutes passed, then more. The sun climbed higher, the city bustling beyond the gates. Eleanor waited, watching the doors. When at last they opened, a man in black livery stepped out instead, a palace servant she did not recognize. He looked around until his eyes found her. Miss Hartmann? Yes. He handed her a sealed envelope. From the Count. She took it, her fingers trembling. Where is he? The man hesitated. Gone with the royal guard. His Majesty insisted on escorting him personally to the Hofburg. He said you would understand. She tore open the letter. It contained only a few words written in Adrian's hand. Do not wait. The truth still has enemies. Trust no one until I return. Her breath caught. Return, she whispered. From where? Before she could move, the bells of St. Stephen's began to ring, not in celebration but in alarm. The city below erupted in shouts as riders galloped through the square. Elena looked down the palace steps, the wind tugging at the letter in her hand. A messenger was shouting above the noise, his voice echoing through the streets. Treason! The Count von Reinhardt has been taken to the Hofburg for questioning, by order of the Crown. Elena stood frozen on the palace steps, the wind snapping her cloak around her legs as the word treason echoed through the square. The crowd rippled with confusion, faces turning, voices rising. She looked down at the letter still clutched in her hand. His warning, "Trust no one," burned in her mind like a brand. She ran toward the carriage, calling out to the driver, "Take me to the Hofburg, now." The man hesitated. "Miss, the guards—" "I'll pay whatever you ask," she said. "Just go." The carriage jolted forward. The streets of Vienna blurred past in chaos, soldiers shouting orders, townsfolk gathering at corners, news spreading faster than the horses could run. When they reached the Hofburg, the gates were already surrounded by soldiers. A line of carriages stood outside, the royal banners fluttering in the wind. Eleanor stepped down, her heart pounding. "I'm here to see Count von Reinhardt," she said to the nearest guard. He looked at her skeptically. "No visitors. The Count is under royal inquiry." "He's no criminal," she protested. "There's been a mistake." The guard shook his head. "Orders from the Crown. No one enters without permission." She turned away, thinking quickly. The back entrance, the servants' passage she had seen once when the Count had attended court years before. She circled the outer wall until she found a narrow alley leading to a smaller door half hidden by ivy. She knocked softly, then harder. At last the door opened a crack, revealing an old man with spectacles. "Yes? What business have you here?" "I'm from the Reinhardt estate," she said, lowering her voice. "The Count's housemaid. Please, I beg you, he's been wrongfully accused. I must see him." The man hesitated. "They're questioning him now. You can't—" "Then tell me where they've taken him," she pleaded. "If I can't see him, I must at least know he's alive." He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "The West Wing, lower chambers. But if they catch you, I'll take the risk," she said, and slipped through the door before he could stop her. The corridors inside were cold and dim, the air heavy with the scent of stone and wax. She moved quietly, keeping to the shadows until she heard voices ahead. "His Majesty wishes to know," one said, "why a Count of the Empire has hidden correspondence with foreign hands." Adrian's voice followed, calm but defiant. "Because there was no such correspondence. You're chasing ghosts as you did before." Another voice spoke, lower, colder. "And the maid, the one you brought here, is she not part of this deceit?" Elena pressed herself against the wall. A new chill gripped her. Someone was using her name again, just as before. Adrian replied sharply, "Leave her out of this. She's done nothing." "She's done everything," the second man said. "She was seen delivering a letter in the square this morning." "That's a lie," Adrian said. Elena's breath caught. Who would dare forge her actions? The interrogator continued. "The royal courier claims she passed him another message, bearing your seal. It contained details of the council's private proceedings." Adrian's voice hardened. "Impossible." "Then how did it appear in the foreign ambassador's hand within the hour?" A heavy silence followed. Elena could bear no more. She stepped into the light. "Because it wasn't me," she said. "I gave no letter to anyone." The guard spun around, startled. The chamber fell silent. Adrian's eyes widened. "Elena, what are you doing here?" "I had to come," she said breathlessly. "They're lying about you. And me." The interrogator frowned. "Who admitted her?" "No one," she answered. "But I will not be silent while others twist our truth." Adrian moved toward her, but the guards blocked his path. "Enough," said the man seated at the table. He was tall, dressed in black velvet, his face partly in shadow. "If you have something to say, Maid, say it carefully. You speak before the king's envoy." She swallowed hard, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Someone forged a letter in my name. I swear it. The Count has nothing to do with it." The envoy leaned back, studying her. "And why should we believe you?" "A servant's loyalty bends easily under affection." "Then believe your own eyes," she said. "I came straight from the palace. I carried only this." She held out the note Adrian had sent her earlier. "The Count's words written before you arrested him. It warns me not to trust anyone until he returns. Does that sound like a man plotting treason?" The envoy's gaze flickered. "Let me see that." She handed him the letter. He read it quickly, his brow furrowing. "This seal, yes, it is his, and the ink is still fresh. Bring the royal courier." Moments later, the same courier who had delivered the summons was led in, looking uneasy. "Is this the man you saw deliver the other message?" the envoy demanded. The courier hesitated. "Perhaps. It was dark. I was told the woman was the maid." "By whom?" Adrian snapped. The courier faltered. "By a gentleman who claimed to serve your house. He wore your crest." Adrian's expression darkened. "My crest? Then it's someone inside the manor." Elena whispered, "Could it be Kreutz? The butler?" He shook his head. "No, he's been with me since childhood. He would die before he betrayed me." The envoy leaned forward. "Enough riddles. Guards, fetch the Count's household staff from the inn at once. We'll have answers tonight." The guards saluted and left. Silence settled again. Adrian turned to Elena, his eyes softening for the first time since she entered. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "They'll use you against me." "Then let them try," she said. "I won't let them bury you again." Before he could answer, the doors burst open. The guards returned, dragging an elderly figure between them, Kreutz, the butler. His wig was askew, his face pale with fear. Adrian's voice was low, disbelieving. "Kreutz?" The envoy gestured. "He was caught near the inn carrying this." He tossed a folded parchment onto the table. It bore the same crest as the forged letter. The butler trembled. "My lord, Speak," Adrian said sharply. The old man wrung his hands. "It wasn't for me, sir. I was told to deliver it. They said it was for the king's secretary. I didn't know." "Who told you?" The butler's eyes darted between them, then fell. "A man calling himself Dr. Weiss. He said he was sent by Lady Gertrude before she died." Adrian frowned. "Weiss? My aunt's physician?" "Yes, my lord. He said he had instructions to safeguard her reputation. He offered me gold." Elena stepped forward. "Then he's the one who forged the letters. He's using her death to finish what she started." The envoy's expression turned grave. "Dr. Weiss has already fled the city. His house was found empty this morning. The guard is searching." Adrian clenched his fists. He was her confessor as well as her physician. He must have known of the poison. Elena's voice trembled. "Then he holds the last piece of truth." The envoy rose. "Until we find him, the Count remains under watch. The maid, too. You will both stay at the Hofburg." Adrian protested. "She has nothing to do with this." "On the contrary," said the envoy, "her name appears on 2 letters that could shake the crown. Until this is settled, she does not leave these walls." The guards stepped forward. Elena's heart raced. "Please," she said. "You can't—" Adrian turned to her. "Don't resist. Let them see we have nothing to hide." They were escorted to separate chambers down the same corridor. The doors shut behind them with heavy locks. The silence that followed was absolute. Hours passed. Outside, the city bells marked the turning of the night. Elena sat by the small window, staring at the faint glow of the palace gardens below. She thought of the Count somewhere nearby, caged yet calm, and of the letter that had nearly damned them both. A soft tap came at her door. She froze. "Who's there?" "Quiet," whispered a voice she recognized. It was the old man who had let her in. "I can't stay long. The physician, he's been seen. He's at the stables, preparing to flee with forged documents. The guard won't move until dawn." Elena's heart leapt. "If he escapes, we'll never be free." "Then stop him," the man said. "You have courage enough for it." He slipped a small key under the door. "This opens your room. The corridor to the stables lies beyond the kitchens. Go now before the watch changes." She hesitated for only a moment. Then she took the key and unlocked the door. The corridor was dim and silent. She slipped through, moving quickly. The scent of hay and leather grew stronger as she neared the stables. A lantern burned near the open doors. Dr. Weiss stood beside a saddled horse, his back turned, packing a leather satchel. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "You're not leaving, Doctor." He froze, then turned slowly. His face was thin, his eyes hollow. "Ah, the maid," he said softly. "Always where you don't belong." "You forged the letters," she said. "You poisoned the Countess. You betrayed them all." He smiled faintly. "Betrayal is only truth told too soon. The Countess wished to die. I only hastened her peace." "She trusted you," Elena said, stepping closer. "As did her husband," he murmured. "I saved them both from each other." "You destroyed them," she said, "and you will answer for it." He reached into his coat and drew a small vial. "This answers everything." Before she could move, he flung it against the wall. Glass shattered, the sharp scent filling the air. Elena covered her mouth, stumbling backward. Weiss mounted the horse, his cloak billowing. She shouted after him, "The world will know what you've done." He looked down at her, his eyes gleaming. "Only if you live to tell it." The horse reared, hooves striking sparks from the stone, and bolted toward the open gate. Elena ran after him, shouting for help, her voice echoing across the courtyard as the sound of hooves thundered into the night. The shouts of the guards rose in answer to her cries. Torches flared to life as soldiers poured from the barracks, swords drawn, their boots striking against the cobblestones. Weiss's horse charged through the courtyard gate, scattering the few who tried to block him. Elena kept running, though her breath tore at her chest. "Stop him!" she cried. "He's the traitor." The captain of the watch seized her arm. "Who are you?" "Elena Hartmann, the maid of Count von Reinhardt. That man has proof of his innocence. He's escaping with it." The captain hesitated for only a heartbeat before barking an order. "After him! Close the south gate." Guards mounted swiftly, and a handful of riders galloped out into the dark streets. Elena stumbled after them until she reached the edge of the courtyard. She pressed her hand against the gatepost, trembling. "He cannot vanish," she whispered to herself. "Not after everything." A firm hand caught her shoulder. She turned. Adrian stood there, pale from confinement, but unharmed. "Elena," he said, breathless, "what are you doing here?" "You're free?" she gasped. "They came for me when they heard the commotion," he said. "The envoy demanded I remain in my chamber, but when I heard your voice—" He stopped, seeing the alarm in her eyes. "What happened?" "The doctor escaped," she said quickly. "He was the one who forged the letters. He confessed to me. He still carries proof, maybe her notes, maybe more." Adrian's expression hardened. "Then we go after him." "You can't," she said. "The guard will think you fled." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll bring them back a prisoner instead." Before she could protest, he took her hand. "Come, you're the only one who's seen which road he took." They crossed the courtyard to the stables. A groom, startled to see them, backed away. "The south road, my lord," he stammered, "toward the river." Adrian threw open the stable door and saddled a horse himself, his movements quick, practiced. He helped Elena mount behind him. "Hold on," he said. "We ride fast." They plunged into the night, hooves striking sparks against the stones. The wind cut through their clothes, carrying the faint echo of pursuit. The road wound downhill toward the river, where the torches of the guards flickered like distant stars. "There!" Elena pointed ahead. A dark shape moved along the embankment. Adrian spurred the horse forward. "Weiss!" he shouted. "Stop in the king's name!" The doctor turned in his saddle, his face ghostly in the moonlight. "You never knew when to let things die, Adrian," he called back. "That's your curse." "Then let this end with truth," Adrian replied. Weiss lashed his horse harder. The animal leapt forward, hooves skidding on the damp stones. Adrian followed, closing the distance yard by yard. Elena clung to him, her heart hammering. The chase ended at the old bridge spanning the Danube. Weiss reached it first, but the boards were slick with frost. His horse stumbled. For a moment, man and beast teetered on the edge, then both crashed to the ground. The doctor rolled clear, rising to his knees as Adrian reined in his horse. "Don't come closer," Weiss shouted, drawing a pistol from his coat. "One step and I'll fire." Adrian slowed, his hand raised. "You won't shoot. You'd rather poison your enemies quietly," Weiss sneered. "A clean shot leaves less guilt." Elena's voice cut through the cold air. "You said the Countess wanted peace. Was that a lie too?" The doctor's gaze flicked toward her. "She begged me for it. She begged for silence." "Then why forge letters? Why frame him?" "Because silence is useless when men demand explanations," he said bitterly. "I gave them one." Adrian's voice was steady. "You gave them lies." "Lies that suited them," Weiss replied, "and they'll suit them still. The court needs a villain, not a confession." The distant thunder of hooves grew louder. The guards were near. Weiss heard it too. His eyes darted to the river, dark and churning beneath the bridge. "I will not be paraded before your king," he hissed. He turned, ready to leap, but Adrian moved first. He caught the doctor's arm, wrenching the pistol from his grasp. The weapon fired harmlessly into the night. The two men struggled, the boards beneath them groaning. Elena slid from the horse and ran forward. "Adrian, stop! You'll both fall!" Weiss twisted free and stumbled backward. His heel caught the edge of the bridge. For a breath he hung there, eyes wide. Then the plank gave way. The river swallowed him without a sound. Elena covered her mouth. Adrian stared into the dark water, his chest heaving. "It's over," he said at last. The guards arrived moments later, torches blazing. The captain dismounted. "My lord, are you hurt?" "No," Adrian said, his voice low. "The traitor took his own punishment." They searched the riverbank, but found only the broken pistol and a small leather satchel, half soaked by the spray. Adrian opened it carefully. Inside were several folded papers, sealed with the Countess's crest and the doctor's mark. Elena peered over his shoulder. "Are they her letters?" He read quickly, his face softening with each line. "No, they're his notes, proof of his guilt. He kept everything. The formula for the poison, the payments from my aunt, even her written plea." The captain nodded. "This will clear you completely, my lord." Adrian looked at Elena. "No, it clears her." They rode back to the Hofburg as dawn broke over the city. The envoy met them at the gate, suspicion still shadowing his face. "You defied my orders," he said coldly. Adrian handed him the satchel. "I brought what you sought." The envoy read the documents in silence. When he spoke again, his tone was different, almost respectful. "The court will confirm this at once. The name von Reinhardt will be restored." Adrian bowed slightly. "I ask nothing but peace for my wife, and for this woman who carried her truth." The envoy nodded. "You have it." When they were alone again, Elena turned to him. "It's done then. The lies are buried." He looked toward the rising sun. "So many graves for one night." She touched his arm. "But this one brings life." He smiled faintly. "You give hope where I thought none could exist." They returned to the manor that afternoon. The snow had melted, and the air carried the faint scent of spring. The servants greeted them with tears and relief. Frau Weiss embraced Elena tightly. "You've come home," she whispered. "Yes," Elena said softly. "Home." Adrian stood at the base of the grand staircase, gazing up at the portraits that lined the walls. "This house can finally breathe again," he said. Elena approached him. "What will you do now?" He turned, his expression gentle. "Live, for the first time in years." "And me?" she asked, half smiling. "You," he said, "will stay as long as you wish, but not as a servant." She lowered her eyes. "And what would I be instead?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Whatever your heart chooses." She was about to answer when a young footman appeared, bowing awkwardly. "My lord, there's a messenger from Vienna. He says it's urgent." Adrian took the parchment the boy offered. His face changed as he read. "What is it?" Elena asked. He looked up slowly. "The king himself requests our presence. He means to honor those who upheld truth. You, Elena, are named beside me." Her breath caught. "Me? But I'm no longer a maid," he interrupted gently. "You're the reason justice stands." She shook her head in disbelief. "They'll never accept me in that hall." "They already have," he said. That evening they set out again, this time not in fear but in peace. The city greeted them with banners and bells. The king received them in the grand chamber, where nobles and courtiers gathered in silence. Adrian knelt before the throne. "Your Majesty," he said, "truth needed only a voice. I was fortunate enough to find one." He turned slightly toward Elena. "This woman saved not only my life but your honor, for justice without courage is only silence in disguise." The king regarded them both, then spoke. "Then courage shall be rewarded. Let history remember not scandal, but redemption." He ordered a decree written that cleared the Reinhardt name and granted Eleanor her freedom and protection under the crown. As they left the palace, the crowds cheered, though Eleanor barely heard them. She turned to Adrian, eyes shining. "Is this what peace feels like?" He smiled. "Peace and beginning." They rode home under a sky streaked with gold. The manor lights glowed like welcome fires. The servants waited at the gates, their faces bright with hope. For the first time, Elena entered through the front doors beside the Count. The house, once heavy with sorrow, now felt alive. Adrian paused beneath the chandelier, listening to the faint hum of music from the ballroom. "Shall we dance?" he asked. She laughed softly. "Here? Now? Why not? We've danced through worse nights." He offered his hand. She took it. The music from the distant pianoforte grew louder, as if the house itself had remembered the melody. They moved together slowly, the rhythm gentle, almost like breathing. The years of grief and silence seemed to melt away. When the song ended, Adrian held her hand a moment longer. "Elena," he said quietly, "I no longer owe the world anything, but I owe you my heart." Her answer trembled on her lips. Then the door opened suddenly, and the butler appeared out of breath. "My lord," he said, "a rider just arrived, from Vienna again. The king's envoy requests your immediate return. He carries a sealed chest found in the river this morning. It bears the countess's crest." Adrian's smile faded. He looked at Eleanor, his eyes dark with uncertainty. "A chest?" he murmured. Then the river hasn't finished speaking. The following morning dawned clear and bright over the Reinhardt estate. The carriage bearing the royal envoy arrived before sunrise, its horses steaming in the cold air. Adrian stood waiting at the gates, his coat drawn close, while Elena lingered beside him, unsure what new twist the day might bring. The envoy descended, bowing slightly. "My lord," he said gravely, "the king's court sends you this chest, retrieved from the riverbank near the bridge. It was found sealed, undamaged." Adrian looked down at it, a small oak chest bound with iron. The crest of the countess gleamed faintly on the lid. "Was anything removed?" "Nothing. His Majesty instructed that it be opened in your presence." Eleanor's hand touched his arm. "Perhaps it's only her keepsakes, or her voice," he murmured. "One last time." They carried the chest into the study. The fire had been lit, throwing warm light across the floor. Adrian took a small key from his desk, the same key his wife had used to lock her jewelry case. The lock gave way easily. Inside were several bundles wrapped in silk, perfectly dry despite their long rest beneath the river's surface. He lifted the first one. It contained letters, a few trinkets, and a worn notebook. The handwriting inside was the countess's. Eleanor stepped closer as he began to read aloud. "Adrian," he read softly, "if you ever find this, know that I left it not out of spite, but mercy. The physician promised me silence, but I feared even silence could be stolen, so I wrote what my heart would not keep." He turned the page, his breath unsteady. "You were never my enemy. You were my peace, though I could not show it. If I must leave this world, let no blame fall on your name. Tell whoever comes after me that love is not possession, but release." He stopped reading. The words trembled in his hand. "She meant to spare me," he said quietly. Elena's eyes filled. "She knew you loved her," he nodded, "and she forgave me before I learned to forgive myself." The envoy cleared his throat gently. "There is also this, my lord." He drew a small sealed envelope from the chest. "It bears your name, written after the countess's hand, yet in a different ink." Adrian frowned, breaking the seal. "It's from the physician," he said. He read quickly, his expression changing from surprise to anger, then to disbelief. "What does it say?" Eleanor asked. "It says he lied even to her," Adrian replied. "He altered her medicine long before she wished for peace. He hastened her death, claiming it was her will. He feared exposure, so he forged the confession and left her letters hidden." Elena's voice broke softly. "Then she never wanted to die." He closed his eyes for a moment. "No. She wanted to live, but she was too alone." The envoy bowed. "His Majesty asked that this truth remain private, if you wish it so. The scandal need not continue." Adrian looked at the letters once more. "No," he said firmly. "The truth will remain as she wrote it. Nothing more. Nothing less." When the envoy departed, silence fell over the room. The fire crackled and the faint scent of ink filled the air. Adrian set the letters carefully back into the chest and closed the lid. "Her soul is free now," he said, "and perhaps mine with it." Elena touched his hand gently. "You set her peace above your pride. That's all she ever wanted." He looked at her, the light from the fire softening his features. "And what do you want, Elena?" She hesitated, her cheeks warming. "Only to see you live without ghosts." He smiled faintly. "Then stay long enough to see it happen." "I would," she said quietly, "if you asked." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Then I ask." For the first time she did not lower her eyes. "Then I will stay." The days that followed brought calm to the estate. Spring came early, melting the snow into silver rivers that ran through the fields. The servants worked with renewed joy, and laughter returned to the halls. The king's decree cleared the Reinhardt name completely, and invitations once withheld now poured in from Vienna. But Adrian no longer sought the court's approval. His world had grown smaller, simpler, defined by the woman who had stood beside him when the world turned away. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Elena walked through the winter garden where everything had begun. The glass walls shimmered with reflected light. She heard footsteps and turned. Adrian stood at the entrance, watching her. "You still come here," he said softly. "It reminds me of that night," she replied, "when I thought you meant to kill me." He smiled. "And yet here you stand, still unpoisoned." "Because you taught me not to fear truth," she said, "even when it hurts." He joined her beside the fountain. The water glittered with sunlight. "I kept this place closed for too long," he said. "Now it feels alive again." She looked up at him. "Because you are." He reached for her hand. "Eleanor, I've asked you to stay, but I've never asked you to belong." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, "that I want you beside me, not as servant or companion, but as equal." Her breath caught. "You would marry me?" He nodded slowly. "If you'll have me." She laughed softly, a sound like wind through leaves. "Do you realize what you're asking? A count and a maid." He smiled. "A man and a woman who have already survived the world's judgment." Her eyes shone. "Then yes?" He exhaled, a smile breaking through the solemnity of years. "Then let the world whisper again if it must." Their hands met, fingers intertwining. For the first time his touch carried no sorrow. It was steady, warm, alive. The wedding took place quietly, at the small chapel beside the river where so much had ended and begun. Only the household and a few loyal friends attended. The king sent a personal gift, a silver chalice engraved with the words, "Truth shall be our peace." As Elena entered the chapel, dressed in pale blue instead of white, the servants wept openly. Adrian stood waiting by the altar, his eyes never leaving hers. When she reached him, he took her hand and said simply, "You gave me life twice, once when you saved me, and again when you forgave me." She smiled through her tears. "You gave me courage to stop being afraid of who I was." When the vows were spoken, the bell above the chapel rang, its clear tone sweeping across the valley. Afterward, they walked to the riverbank. The spring air smelled of thawing earth and wild blossoms. Adrian took the small chest, the one that had held his wife's letters, and opened it one last time. "She asked for release," he said. "Let her have it." Together they cast the letters into the river. The current caught them gently and carried them away, each page fluttering like a white bird until it vanished beneath the glittering surface. Elena slipped her hand into his. "She's free." He nodded. "And so are we." They returned to the manor hand in hand. Music awaited them, soft, distant, coming from the ballroom. The servants had gathered with instruments, playing a slow waltz in their honor. Adrian laughed quietly. "They've conspired against us." "Then let's not disappoint them," she said. He led her into the center of the room. The chandeliers glowed like captured stars, and the polished floor reflected their movements. She rested her hand on his shoulder, and they began to dance. It was not the dance of that terrible night a year ago, when fear had bound every step. It was gentle, unhurried, the rhythm of two hearts learning to breathe in time. "Do you remember the first time we danced?" he asked. "I remember thinking you meant to ruin me," she said, smiling. "And I remember thinking you might save me," he replied. Her laugh was quiet, joyous. "Then we were both right." When the last note faded, the servants applauded softly. Adrian bowed to her with mock ceremony. "Mrs. von Reinhardt," he said, tasting the name like a vow. She blushed. "That will take some getting used to." "I have time," he said. "A lifetime, if you'll allow it." The evening melted into celebration. The tables were set with flowers from the garden, the air filled with warmth and laughter. For the first time the great house felt like home, not a monument to grief. Later, when the guests had gone and the candles burned low, Adrian and Eleanor stepped out onto the terrace. The moon hung full above the hills, silvering the gardens. "This place," she said softly, "it doesn't feel haunted anymore. Because its ghosts were only memories waiting to be forgiven," he said. She turned to face him. "And you? Are you forgiven?" He drew her close. "You tell me." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the quiet strength of his heartbeat. "Yes," she whispered. "You are." He lifted her chin gently, and their lips met, slow, sure, unafraid. The world fell away until only the night remained, vast and full of promise. When they finally parted, he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I once thought love was a chain," he said. "But it's the key." She smiled, then promised never to lock it away again. "Never," he said. They stayed there until the moon sank and the first light of dawn touched the horizon. The estate stretched before them, washed in pale gold. Adrian took her hand again. "Tomorrow we begin anew," he said. "No more courts, no more secrets, just life and love," she added. "And love," he agreed. The years that followed were quiet, but full. The manor became a place of laughter and song. Children's voices eventually echoed through its halls, their joy mingling with the scent of spring flowers. The townsfolk spoke of the Count and his wife as a pair who turned sorrow into kindness. No one remembered the scandal, only the way he looked at her, as if every sunrise began with her name. But tonight, that future had not yet come. Tonight, there was only the two of them, standing beneath the soft light of the fading moon, the cool wind brushing past like a whisper of blessing. Elena leaned against him, her voice barely audible. "Do you think she watches us?" "I hope she smiles," he said, "because now her story has found its ending." "And ours its beginning," she replied. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "No poison lasts," he whispered, "when love learns the truth." The wind stirred the garden trees, scattering the first blossoms of spring. Somewhere in the distance the church bells rang again, not in mourning but in celebration, their clear tones carrying across the valley like a promise kept. Hand in hand, they turned toward the doors of the manor, the light spilling from within. The music started once more, soft and hopeful, calling them back to life, to laughter, and to the endless waltz of a love finally found. Thank you so much for listening to this story, all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.